So we continue in the second part of chapter 26. Last week we spoke about we reached up to where it says Gamzul Teva, which based on the Alter Rebbe explains the Mishnah, how one is supposed to appreciate and bless HaKadosh Baruch Hu when he experiences any negative experience, in the same way that he experiences a positive experience. And the Gemara says, "L'kabula b'simcha," to accept it with joy, and because Gamzul Teva, because everything is ultimately for the good. Now, why did Alter Rebbe just give a little backdrop over here to I will just say we're not going to invest more time because last week we started this part and we explained what is the message, why the Alter Rebbe is introducing this whole explanation over here. Why does he elaborate on this Mishnah? But one could always find previous classes on koshertube.com with the text on tanyaonline.com. And but again, in brief, to get the flow over here, the Alter Rebbe is telling the Yid that I just gave you in the very beginning of Chavav, which we learned in the last 2 or 3 weeks, of the importance and the essentiality of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu with joy and an uplifted spirit, gladness of heart, and again, not as an additional flavor to our service of God, but this is important. This is a necessity in order to triumph over the Yetzer Hara, because if we are atzeil, laid back, down, lazy, or down emotionally down, which brings us to be perhaps brings us to this atzlus, this laziness. Many times atzlus comes because of atzvut. The person is melancholy, sad, depressed, etc. So, because even if you have all the information, the entire manual, you know it inside out, what we're supposed to do or we're not supposed to do, which is basically the Alter Rebbe up to the pitch, to the chapter 26. And not only that, you have the might to overcome the Yetzer Hara, but if you are anything less than a full, upright, and uplifted spirit, anything less than joyous in your battle with your Yetzer Hara, you will succumb. You'll probably, or it's more than a probability that you will succumb to the Yetzer Hara. Therefore, it's important. Like when one fights, one battles, or in war, it's not enough. Not only has the tactics and the capacity or the capabilities or the strength to win in the overriding strength over the enemy, but it's important that he goes with a march. He goes with an upbeat spirit, because anything less than that, the enemy would have the ability to overcome him in his fight, because despite the enemy has less of the might and less of the capability, is because you didn't come in with the adequate simcha. And so too now, Avodas Hashem, again, this is, we expounded on, the Alter Rebbe deals with this we learned this in the 3 classes ago, the importance, and as we all know it, that it's not only that we have the information and the might, we have to be simply b'tich simcha, we have to be joyful, joyous, and tiv tuv levav, like the expression of the pasuk, b'simcha v'tuv levav, with joy and elevation and elation of spirit, and tuv levav, and gladness of heart. So the Alter Rebbe in the last week's class dealt with the problems, or deals with the notion that we don't choose our moods, we don't choose our laid-backness, we don't choose to be sad, we don't choose to be melancholy. It is unfortunately, in the throughout a person's life, it can happen, as we try to speak about this in a hypothetical manner, because we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu that everything should only be good, and the good should be in complete, total, and overwhelming levels of manifestation. or overwhelmingly manifested. The teif should be teif hanira v'anigla, but let's talk about it hypothetically. In a person's life, things could come his way, which brings the spirit down. So what do you want from the Yid? What do you want from this Yid? What do you do? How do you suggest? What do you tell the Yid? On one hand, you tell him, Yivdas Hashem b'simcha. And again, not only another flavor, it's crucial to be victorious over the Yetzer Hara, in order to triumph and to win over the Yetzer Hara, to be joyous, to be b'simcha. On the other hand, you tell him you placed him as neshama in a physical body, which is vulnerable to encounter or to deal with the unfortunate realities which challenge the person in different areas of life. May it be Boneh Chayim Mazena, again, which encapsulates the Gashmias of Elam Haza, the Gashmias of life, Gashmias success, physical success of life, healthy children, health for oneself, and a prosperous livelihood, and so on. And one could be challenged. So here, this with Alter Rebbe introduces the Mishnah, and it should not interfere. It should not interfere in your simcha. It should not interfere in your joy, because one has to accept b'simcha, with joy, the apparent good, or rather the joy, the experiences which are not as apparently good, or sometimes even more than that. Exactly the same way, kishem, the Mishnah says, the same exact way as one rejoices when he experiences obvious good which is apparent to his own eye, good which is manifest. And the Alter Rebbe concludes, again, the last week, Gamzul Teva. As we explained and we elaborated last week, Tev, good, is not something which I see or I decided to define what good is. People take things which are not good and define it good. It could be destructive. Good has to have ultimately an absolute term, or the term of good has to be associated with something which is absolute. I gave the example, someone's rushing for a train. The best thing to him is to catch a train. If in a half an hour he finds out the train, precisely the car which he's used to entering, was in a terrible, severe accident, again, hypothetically, so then he realizes that it was the best thing that he didn't catch a train. So what is good? You catch a train is good, or you didn't catch a train is good. So that's why good cannot be relative, because true taiv has to be an absolute taiv. An absolute taiv comes from an absolute entity, and the only true absolute entity is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when a person sees, this is what the Mishnah says, you see the good, there's certainly good. But even if you didn't see the good, it's coming from the same source, Gamzul Teva. Again, we elaborate on this, we even introduced the story of Nachum Ish Gamzul. But we're going to go on, what Alter Rebbe is saying over here, and this we indicated this, or he alluded to this, and to this subsequent words in the end of last week's class. What Alter Rebbe says, not only Gamzul Teva, that when you don't see the good, it's also for the good, but there's a new message, a different message of the Alter Rebbe, even deeper than that the good which you cannot see comes from a deeper place within HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is Tachlis HaTeiv. From this icon, which is good, which is ultimately the absolute good, which is the absolute God, it comes from a deeper part within HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is the reason why the good does not stand in a state of manifestation, because it comes from a more hidden part from Hashem. Like we quoted, the pasuk says, Yeshiv b'Seiser, and you want to know where that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is? He himself, the deeper part, just like by a person. The deeper parts of the person are reserved, are discreet, are within. You don't know about them. No one really knows what goes on in the other person's mind or heart. You only know what you see, what comes to a state of expression. That's what you can hold on to. That's what you can perceive. That's what you can appreciate. And a person express himself, what he speaks, what he does, his actions. You see him. You see him. What you can see of him, that's what you can appreciate of him or her. And even then, not necessarily one could have a complete, comprehensive understanding and appreciation of another person. But at least what you can get your hands on is something with the way the person expresses himself. What's within the person, and it was the way the person is for himself, by himself, his inner feelings, his inner train of thought, his inner understandings, we can't really appreciate it. And and we all know, or this is again synonymous with the notion that this which the person, the state of reservation within the person, the way he's reserved, the state of discreteness within a person, when the person's the hidden dimension of the person, that's closer to the person's soul. That's something which cannot come to a state of expression. So you only can tap in something which is in a state of expression. You cannot tap in with something which is on the onset. It was never expressed. It's not meant to be expressed. It's because the person, the way he is within himself, stands in a state of reservation. Discreteness. And that's more the etzem of the person. That's more the core essence. The deeper you get, the more the unknown, the more the core of the etzem, the core of the person, the essence of the person. When it even comes to human beings. How much more so when you're dealing with a Kodesh Baruch Hu, or similarly when you're dealing with a Kodesh Baruch Hu. The pasuk says Yeshiv. You want to know where the Yeshiv is? Where's the core essence of a Kodesh Baruch Hu? B'seised Elyon. In a very deep level, at a high level, where the Eibishter is within, for himself, by himself. That's the core essence of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. So, when a person experiences, and here the Alter Rebbe uses the words Alma Diskasia, the hidden worlds, the hidden expressions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because every Olam is by definition an expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not God himself, Mamish. It's a deeper dimension within God, but a world is an expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, God forbid, not an Olam. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not a world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu transcends the whole notion of any Olam, even a deep and higher Olam. But so Olam is an expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it's an expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu which is a deeper, it's a hidden expression. Hidden expression is, it says the reason why the Olam is hidden, the Olamot, these worlds are hidden, is because they're overwhelmed by the presence of God. Hence the Olam itself is mechuseh, is covered. So when a person experiences something which the experience, he doesn't see, it's covered, in other words, it's covert, it's hidden. The experience, he doesn't see any positivism, he doesn't see any positivity in that experience. Hence, there's something hidden about that experience. So, thus shall you know, Torah tells us that experience, it's not coming from an inferior part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore you can't make it out, you can't perceive it, you can't appreciate it. On the contrary, you could perhaps even complain against it, because it's a concealed experience, or experience when the reality of God appears to be concealed. The good appears to be concealed. You don't see the Tov. Shall you know the opposite is true. It comes from a more profound part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the hidden part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Olamot HaMechusim, the expressions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is completely hidden, hence deeper within HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We must say that it's a deeper Tov, it's a deeper goodness. Based again, predicated on this which we explained, that Tov is not a relative, true Tov is not a relative Tov. True Tov is an absolute Tov. True good is an absolute good, associated with an absolute God, which is the only true absolute entity. So when you say that the person receives from a deeper level, a deeper level within, or a level which is hidden, in other words, an expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, an Olam, an expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is hidden within HaKadosh Baruch Hu, hence a deeper part of God. So if it's a deeper part of God, it must be a deeper part of good, as opposed to something which comes in a revealed way, that you see the good. This comes from a more inferior level of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. An expression, Alma Disgalia, a world which is revealed, like we just said, by two people. When you see, when the person you know is in a state of expression, that's already an inferior part of the person. When his expression is revealed, you can make out an expression. You can make sense of what he says. You can make sense of what he does. Something you can relate to. That's already the inferior part of the other person. The deeper part of the second party, the deeper part of the party, that's more of something which you cannot make out, something you cannot tap into, his deep thoughts, his deep emotions, and so on and so forth. That's a deeper part within the person himself. So the part of the expression which you can make out, which is nigla means it's revealed, it's something which you can tap into, that's an inferior part of the other person, similar to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When you can make out the good, you should know ultimately it's coming from an inferior dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The part of the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu expresses himself in a way of nigla, In other words, in a revealed way, which means it's already a step away from the hiddenness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of the Seiser Elyein of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it's fine. We don't have to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please, I have so much good, please interfere, challenge me in my parnasa, or challenge me in other areas of life because I want a deeper part within you. We don't ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu that. Quite on the contrary, we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu make it easier for us, and that's the whole basis of the entire the notion of prayer, that we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu even when we do have a problem. Please bless us and give us a good year and cure us and so on. As this is these are the brachas of namely the Shemona Esrei. It's 7 to 18 brachas, which we say 3 times a day. But chas v'shalom, God, in other words, we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu that everything should be good. In other words, that our eye should perceive the goodness. But God forbid, when one doesn't experience the goodness which he would like to experience. So first of all, again, in last week, the emphasis is Gam Zula Teva, because it's also good, because it comes from the same good, the same source of good, which is God ultimately. Here the Alter Rebbe says, not only is similar tantamount to the good which is apparent, but more so it's a deeper level of goodness, which again, a deeper level within HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with God, which hence ultimately it's a deeper, more profound good.
That God gave His infinite wisdom within the finite 5 books of Moses. So it doesn't mean that God, the expression inferior part of God is in itself, contradictory. It's
for that matter, just the opposite. For that matter, the up. You're saying
he should be able to produce whatever level of goodness through the revealed goodness. Like for him, it's not a limitation.
It's true. And again, that's the way the Yiddishkeit is built. That we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Prayer is one of the beams and the foundations, the poles, which the world stands on. One of the beams where the world stands on. When the Amudim that the world stands on. So, in other words, this is part of it's incorporated in Yiddishkeit. We ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu that everything should be good. But what if someone doesn't? By the way, looking at the difference of, you're saying, for example, Torah. Torah is the best example. Torah comes from the deepest dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore, for example, look, you have Shisha Sidrei Mishnah.
Yes, it's revealed.
You have hundreds. You have even starting from the Talmud itself. You have tens and tens of tractates, right? Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, and each one is broken up to many tractates, all dealing with Chamisha Chumsha Torah. For example, we spoke about this last night. How do you know you put on tefillin in your left hand, on the weaker hand rather? It's because one place in Torah that Kodesh Baruch Hu writes the word Yadcha different than he writes it normally, or the Torah Hashem writes it normally, which is Yud Dalet Chaf Safit. One place he writes Yadcha Yud Dalet Chaf Hey. We're not going to get into it right now, but just giving a small example. So we see the Chacham say, hey, what's that? HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes no mistakes. And they understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu is sending a message over here, because Keheh in Hebrew, and Lashon HaKodesh, and also modern Hebrew as well, is weak. So they understood HaKadosh Baruch Hu said Yad Keheh. They split the word. Instead of Yadcha, Yad Keheh, which is the weaker hand. So if you're righty, you put it on the left hand, and you put it on. So you see over here that in the contrary, it's a proof that HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed himself in Torah. But the way he revealed himself in Torah, you see the deepest dimensions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How you're able to extract and build so many halachas on the smallest details and nuances of Torah. So you have Asara Mamaris Nivra Ilm also, because Baruch Hu said 10 sayings in order to create the world. So you have Asara Mamarot and you have Asara Sadibrot. The Asara Mamarit, it's true, it's more revealed. Look out there, you wake up in the morning. What do you see in front of your eyes? You see yourself, you see the world around you. That's the revealed part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's why it's all revealed. The Torah is a personal and inward dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. It's an expression of the core essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not the inferior dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what I said as Hadibris is something totally different. Because this is what this is part, not to go into it, but this is what you're saying, this is why the Torah is called a matana. This is part of the great gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us. He gave us a part of himself. When he created the world, it's the most inferior part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ma'amad. It's like someone saying something. Speech is an inferior expression, as opposed to someone's thought, or deeper than that, his feelings, his intellect. and go deeper and deeper, his ratzin, his desire, his pleasure, deeper and deeper to the soul. When it comes to Torah, this is part of why Torah is called the Matana, the greatest gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He gave us not only the inferior dimension, revealed to us not only his inferior dimension, but Anochi Hashem Elokecha. He gave us not only the energy which is associated with Shem Elokim, not only the energy which is associated with Shem Hashem, even the energy, even his core essence he gave to us. Anochi. Actually, Anochi doesn't even have any translation, which is again similar, synonymous with what we said before. The deeper you get within the person is beyond definition. And the Gemara says precisely in Anochi, the Gemara says an acronym, Anon Nafshik Savas Yehavis. Hashem says, I gave you my entire soul. That's what Torah is all about. So Torah is the biggest proof, or rather Torah is something, this is again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us his essence, and you see again that this is the deepest part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore we extract from every letter and every detail and every way the pasuk is written with all the rules of Torah, because you're dealing with the core strings of Hashem's soul, if you can say it in such a way. So getting back to what we're saying over here, that when a person, so therefore, when again, let's put it into context. The reason why Alter Rebbe is explaining this to us is just to tell us that we should not be, in other words, should not, when a person experiences negative experiences, it should not reflect on his upbeatness, on his joy and his elation, which is so crucial and is such a necessity in order for him to overcome the Yetzer Hara. Because if he'll fall into depression, the Yetzer Hara would have Yetzer Hara would immediately triumph over him. And therefore it's important a person should be on duty all the time. What does he do with this, with the fact that he has certain tzaras, certain unfortunate experience? So again, the Alter Rebbe tells you it should still, and again based on the Mishnah, it should still not interfere with your simcha v'tov, with your joy and gladness of heart. Because in here the Alter Rebbe says not only gamzul teva, but let's see inside. It's because kimi alma diskasi, it comes from the deeper worlds of the deeper worlds of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and again the hidden worlds of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the hidden expressions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is shalamayla mi alma diskali, higher than the revealed expressions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the revealed worlds of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Which again it says that this is the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name is divided. There's the Yud-Kei and the Vav-Kei, which the Yud-Kei is divided again in between the Yud-Kei and the Vav-Kei. The Yud-Kei is the more deeper dimensions of Hashem, like explained in Kabbalah and Chassidus. And then the Vav-Kei is the more inferior dimension of Hashem. So the Almid is Galia, the revealed worlds, the revealed expressions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is associated with Vav-Kei, from Shem Hashem. Blessed be He. Almid Iskasya is Yud-Kei of Shem Hashem, the deeper dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so if you experience something which you cannot pinpoint, you cannot explain, or you cannot see the good, and quite on the contrary, you find the good extremely concealed and hidden. In that whole experience, you should know not only Gamzul Teva, but you're reaching a deeper level of good within HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A deeper level of God, hence a deeper level of good. This is what the pasuk says: Ashrei Hagever She'tiasrenaka. That fortunate is the person which God brings him Yisurim, brings him let's call it experiences which are unpleasant experiences. Yisurim, pain, afflicts the person with pain. So the simple meaning of the pasuk is Ashrei Hagever, fortunate is the individual, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings him Yisurim. But interestingly, and in the spirit of it, Alter Rebbe is saying over here that it's a deeper dimension. It comes from the Yud-Kei of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now I understand. It doesn't say Ashrei Hagever, Ashrei Tiasenu Hashem. It says that, which means again the full name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ashrei Hagever Shetiasrenu Yud-Kei Ka, which the Yud-Kei, that's where the Yisurim come from. The deeper dimension within Hashem, which is again reflects in Hashem's name, the Yud and the Kei, as opposed to the Vav and the Kei. For the Razal's sake, those who rejoice with endurance of pain, in negative experiences of they don't see, they can't tap into the good. Let's use those words. And this is upon these upon these people which rejoice with Yisurim, which means they put these experiences in a very proper perspective, aligned with what Alter Rebbe tells us over here. Again, basically we explained last week, and this new dimension Alter Rebbe introduces in this class. And then the pasuk says and promises, those who love the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they will experience when the sun comes out with its full intensity. And kiasimcha, in other words, like this. Alter Rebbe says the culmination of these words are based a little bit of what we mentioned last week. A little bit alluded to this in this week's class. That in the end of the day, because it's a closer and a deeper dimension with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When that comes to in a state of manifestation, a state of revelation, the good is enormous, is explosive, is revolutionary. Because it was coming from a deeper part within HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So normally, the deeper part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu remains deep, remains hidden. Hence, the way it comes into manifestation, what does the person experience? Something which the good is hidden. But ultimately, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides to push that button, in other words, to take that inner tape and bring that out to fruition or to a state of revelation, then the good is not a simple good, it's an explosive good. Why is it an explosive good? Why is it a revolutionary good? Because it's coming from a deeper part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We mentioned the story last week with Nachum Ish Gamzu, right? If you remember, Nachum Ish Gamzu, the story that he represented the community with a chest full of gold and silver and diamonds and so on. He came to thee and they stole it from him. And they put in earth. When he presented the king, obviously it evoked the wrath of the king. And then he was put into prison. Till someone, again, we elaborate a little more on the story, one could see it in the Talmud. And to see all the details. And eventually someone told the king that it can't be these Syrian Jews would do that to you. Probably this earth is similar to the earth of their ancestor Avraham Avinu, which we know that Avraham Avinu, when he fought the wars against the different kings, he used special earth which miraculously turned into arrows. And that's why Avraham Avinu was successful. So he told the king, if the Jewish, the sincere community, they didn't lose their mind to mock you, probably this is the earth which has the same character, the same nature as the ancestors. So the king happened to be, the Gemara says happened to be fighting a few wars there, or a war at that time. So he figured, let me try it. He tried it, and sure it was. Sure it was so. Or in the end, it was taka so. And this earth turned into arrows, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu intervened at that moment. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu intervened in that moment, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu changed the earth into arrows. And eventually they took out Nachum Ish Gamzu. At the end of the story, he annulled the negative decree and he gave him up with presents. So, and again, we spoke about the story. So one of the points we pointed out in the story was, it's not only that the earth was something which could have appeased the king. Perhaps it was precisely this type of present would appease the king. Had he brought him gold and silver to a king, gold and silver, or he's going to appreciate it, he won't appreciate it. He virtually doesn't need it. Because the king has many treasures of gold and silver. If he's going to appreciate the kindness or the expression of the community to try to appease him, in other words, if he's going to accept their present or not, that's a question. It remains to be answered. But it was precisely because they took away the devastating scenario of Rav Nachum Ish Gamzu was robbed from this gold and silver. And instead of that, they put in that earth. That's why ultimately the king appeased the community. And the end of the story had a good ending. In other words, because on the surface, again, this is Nachum Ish Gamzu used to say Gamzu lo teva to everything. That is, everything is for the good. But because he understood that if this is what happened, it's because ultimately it's coming from a deeper dimension within HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu expressed that deeper dimension within himself, it came not only in regular tape, okay, we're going to find this thief and bring the gold and silver, and who knows if he'd be appeased. No, that tape came in full strength and full intensity, and that's why ultimately they were saved. Similar to what he says over here. When the Jew trusts in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he puts things in perspective, and he's smeichem b'yisurim. In other words, he rejoices, meaning to say, he puts things in the accurate perspective. HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises, Kitzeis Hashem ish b'gvorasei, that sun is going to come out in its full glory and its full intensity. And you, that Yid, which lived a full life with focusing, and taking all this experiencing with this precise focus, and this precise, putting things in this precise perspective, you will ultimately experience that says Hashem ish b'gvorasei, when the sun will come out in its full intensity. This is the Alter Rebbe culminates again in the coming class in the coming weeks. But this is ultimately the message over here. Getting back to what we're saying over here, that till HaKadosh Baruch Hu does that, But we hope HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't wait. But until HaKadosh Baruch Hu does that, it never interferes with the simcha v'tuv livav. The yid must attain as he's on the battlefield serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu to overcome Yetzer Hara, which is pretty much every day and every moment of the person's life. Have a wonderful evening.